Congressman Turner, I'm delighted to welcome to the Atlantic Council today. For many across the Balkans, you are more than a legislator in Washington. You are a steadfast defender of the region's stability and someone whose voice on Capitol Hill resonates with citizens who still look to the United States for clarity, for guidance, for partnership.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for having and being part of Balkan Debrief. You are a Republican representative from Ohio, serving since 2003, co-chair of the Congressional Bosnia Caucus and lead of the U.S. Delegation to the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. Am I saying right?
Yes, correct.
All this position place you at the heart of the America's strategic thinking about Europe, transatlantic security and cooperation, and indeed the Western Balkans. So that's where I'm going to start with the first question. We begin 2026 with a new national security strategy and the NDAA that includes the Western Balkans Prosperity and Democracy Act, which directs a 90-day deadline for the administration to act on sanctions for those who destabilize the region or undermine diplomatic agreements like Dayton, for instance, that I know you are very much invested. The region is frankly holding its breath, especially on this 90 days deadline. Has been a lot of media coverage and expectations from Washington. Many in the Balkans, though, are wondering whether the U.S., with this new strategy, is it leaning in the region or kind of managing a quiet retreat? What's your take on it?
Well, I think the administration is leaning in. And one thing that is interesting is for so long, I think the United States has taken an active view, but a passive view in the affairs in the region. We've not stepped away, but at the same time, we've not been active. I think this administration really wants to be active in a way to try to resolve some of the issues that could result in conflict, and that's very positive because we just celebrated the 30th year of the Dayton Peace Accords, where there has been since that time stability in the region, but at the same time there's also been stagnation in the region, and I think there is, with the international community's assistance, an opportunity for transition. There's an opportunity for growth. There's an opportunity for ways in which we can build on what has happened. And we've seen certainly in some of the countries in the Balkan region growth and an opportunity. And now we need to take that next step to say, what are ways in which we can assist the communities in the region to be able to heal and move forward. And that dialogue, that community assistance, I think really will be a very fruitful process.
And I hope you don't mind me bringing the sentiment from the region here during this conversation, because many in the region as well argue that the U.S. diplomacy has become more transactional, fewer principles, more power politics. Is that a fair assessment in your view?
And not really, because if you look at overall, the U.S. interest in the area has only been the peace and prosperity for the region. The U.S. interests in the area are can't be reduced to our commerce, because we don't really have in the area a significant interest other than the peace and prosperity of the region, and that building democratic institutions, building stability in the area is the legacy really of many administrations. You just really see it in this administration.
And the new U.S. strategy emphasizes sovereignty and stability to curb migration and external interference, the so-called Trump corollary. Where does the Western Balkans fit into this framework? And is it a strategic priority, or is merely a buffer against Russia?
Well, I think in order to have sovereignty, in order to have stability, in order to have prosperity, you have to make certain that those external influences of authoritarian regimes are able to be rebuffed, because authoritarian regimes, they're the antithesis of those things. So in order to strengthen a region, you have to make certain that they're able to counter those influences.
And in order to counter those influences, indeed, you need strong presence in the region. And we are in the second year of Trump administration, yet no U.S. embassy in the 6 Western Balkan countries have a Senate-confirmed ambassador. In fact, the administration, as you know, recently retracted at least a dozen of additional embassy chiefs. Can Washington credibly claim a robust policy with so many empty chairs at the table? And what is it to be done about? Have you pressed Secretary Rubio or your Senate colleagues to stop treating these appointments with such a low priority?
Well, the Balkans is not unique in that area. Throughout the globe, you see that in many of our embassies. But what's interesting, because I've been in and out of the Balkans, and I was just there in November, everyone sees our embassies as being very active. So the professionals that are in our embassies, the policies that are coming from our State Department and from the administration are seen as very active in the region. So even without an appointed ambassador, we're seen as very active embassies. So I think that the appointment itself is not seen as the litmus test of whether or not our presence is making an impact.
I get it. So you don't see it as a main problem when it comes to the credibility of the U.S., which actually is the greatest asset and the strongest currency that the U.S. has in the region. About the Democracy and Prosperity Act that now is a law mandating also U.S. investment, which I'm very interested to talk about. Meanwhile, in the region, we have democratic backsliding, high level of corruption, and the lack of U.S. private sector presence. With the Prosperity and Democracy Act, do you think that the capital can somehow substitute institutions in the region, or we risk to create a new I have called this new generation of oligarch, but I want to know your thoughts of that.
I think I think institutions are incredibly important because they ensure the continuity of democratic principles, and I think though that hand-in-hand aspects of their institutions, but also they ensure the continuity of prosperity and certainly the propagation of prosperity. So I think the intent is not concentrations of capital, but the infusion of capital and the growth of democratic principles and institutions that promote democracy.
So the investment that is mentioned in the Democracy and Prosperity Act are U.S. funds, taxpayers, or private sector presence, increase of private sector?
Well, I think we want to encourage trade also, and capital through trade in commerce, and that both ensures longevity and ensures that we're going to have the continuation of contacts and communication between the United States and the Balkan region. It's not just government to government. It has to be markets to market and economies to economy.
And you did mention, and I know it's close to your heart, Bosnia and Sarajevo. You were there in late November, named an honorary citizen, and also helped inaugurate the Dayton Peace Square. My question is that what message were you sending to not just political elites, but to the citizens who fear that the fragile peace that they have had for these 30 years since Dayton Accords and the Dayton ethnic architecture has become more like a trap rather than a safeguard for their state, for their country?
I think there's a couple things that are always important, and every time I return to Sarajevo, I try to make one point. And that is that the people of Sarajevo, the people of Bosnia, need to feel the congratulations, the accomplishment, the honor of what they have done. So many times, if you don't step away and come back, if you don't look, if you don't do a retrospective of what has been accomplished, it's very difficult to look at the prospective. And I think that's what's important whenever you commemorate a milestone is to say, what have we accomplished before we look at what we have not done. And that's important because so much has been done in Bosnia and in Sarajevo. I see it every time I return. and people need to be celebratory of those accomplishments. And it's been done by people, by their own work, by their own accomplishments. And then secondly, the Dayton Peace Accords and the Constitution that was adopted was never meant to be a long-term governing document. It was to end a war. It was to bring peace. But the transition to a governing document was expected to be done not just by an international community finger wag looking at the people of Bosnia and Herzegovina. It was also with an expectation the international community was going to be that long-term partner. And I think in that we've sort of fallen short, both. And we need to rekindle that spirit of working together so we can find that transition to how do we get past this this document that brought peace and to a governing document, a governing framework.
You have warned, even before that, efforts to unravel Dayton while pivoting toward Moscow can be destabilizing, and they're concerning. How close you believe is Bosnia today to some serious security crisis? What are the red flags that concern you?
Well, I think any area that has had such a long history, a repeat history of conflict, always has the threat of once again sinking into the possibility of conflict. And that's why it takes concert effort by the leaders that are there and by the international community to pay attention. So I wouldn't say that there's a clock or a calendar or some measure in which you can look to the closeness or the exact threat. But I think you just have to have it as a constant dedication to ensure that it doesn't happen again.
Meanwhile, there are things happening there. In October, the administration removed Milorad Dodik and his network from the specially designated national sanction list, a move that many in Congress called a grave mistake. You have advocated for Dayton II and for a renewed U.S. leadership in Bosnia, as you highlighted here again. How does lifting sanctions on a leader that constantly threatens secession advance that goal?
Well, the State Department has indicated, and rightly so, that they received significant concessions in the Republic of Srpska for the rescinding of those sanctions. They listed a number of violations that were reversed in releasing those sanctions that were advances toward receiving reconciliation in the area. Now, Dodik himself is going to be continuing to be a source of really volatile rhetoric, and continues to be. That's going to be of some grave concern, and he can be subject to additional sanctions. And I think that's something that's going to be continued to be monitored, and perhaps sanctions could be and should be placed on him again, depending upon what his behavior is. But I do think is a real opportunity for, again, the international community, as you indicated with Dayton II, or any other mechanism to come together and work to try to look at that transition where we can see, how do we get to a governing structure
that is functioning for Bosnian citizens. But again, on the Dodik point, what is the end state if engagement with Dodik were to happen and to be successful? What is the end state for the U.S.?
Well, I don't think it's an issue for the U.S. I think it's an issue for the region and for Bosnia and Herzegovina. It has to be an issue of reform, and it has to be an issue of transition.
There are many constitutional reforms which have been supported in the past, including a more ceremonial presidency, for instance, and stronger state competences. In today's polarized Sarajevo, do you believe that this is still a viable roadmap, or is a relic of a more hopeful moment for Bosnia?
Well, I don't think the international community can pick or decide. I think this has to be something that
with a leader
that is within Bosnia and Herzegovina, but I think it has to be something the international community is a partner in assisting the transition. We can't, just though on the outside, look to them to just accomplish. It's going to have to be with our assistance and guidance.
You did say something that I'm sure is going to get a lot of attention in the region, that additional sanctions may be imposed in case the rhetoric continues against Dodin
The
or
authority
other.
is still there.
And that's my question. Does the NDAA, via the Western Balkan Democracy and Prosperity Act, addresses future reversals or imposure of sanctions towards the leaders in the Balkans?
Well, the State Department continues to have that authority. I know they're continuing to constantly review the issue as to what they will do or what they should do. So it is within their authority. And that means, of course, that the sanctions will be used as they should be for encouraging appropriate behavior and transitioning behavior that can hopefully, work to reconciliation and some transition that is normalization.
So this is a decision that is in the discretion of the State Department to decide on the removal or
That's where the authorities lie.
or imposer. Serbia-Kosovo. Is it realistic to say that there is a new American hand in this regard? Because both in the NSS and the NDAA, the normalization dialogue between Serbia and Kosovo were mentioned. In the region, there is little hope that the dialogue can continue or bring some concrete results. Realistically, do you see this as a change, a new approach towards Kosovo-Serbia?
Well, I think in both instances there needs to be a renewed commitment on the leadership side. I mean, I think there was certainly a disappointment with the engagement with the EU. There was an expectation of some implementation that did not occur, and I think we do need to see some greater engagement that currently is not there.
And if the engagement doesn't happen,
I think the United States is role is very, very important, and I think the United States is engaged.
One question here. I know it's a little bit maybe a technicality, but if you have an answer about the association of the Serb majority municipalities, is it still a non-negotiable condition for the U.S.?
In what respect?
Because it's a condition that the Kosovo should implement it.
Well, Kosovo had indicated that they were going to implement it. It was not being imposed. It was actually
on the agreement.
There's actually a statement that there was an agreement.
So it is still a condition.
It was stated by Kosovo as an agreement.
Well, I'm sure that the Prime Minister Kurti has a different view.
I guess it would depend on when he would state as to.
We'll see how the format of the dialogue will address that issue. But let's talk about Belgrade now. On New Year's Eve, Treasury granted a temporary reprieve to Serbia on the Nis refinery, effectively demanding a break with Russian energy partners by March. Now, critics call this coarse economic restructuring. How would you call this?
Well, Vučić himself has said that they would be moving forward to take such an action. So we'll have to see how Serbia moves forward.
Does the U.S. have a position on who will be the potential buyer of the Serbian the Nis?
I'm unaware of such a position.
Okay. The European question is next in my list of questions. Does the United States still see a unified Europe as a strategic necessity for the Balkans, or is it a relic of the past?
Well, I think what we've seen from those countries that have joined the EU, that it has been very successful economically, and those countries that have done so in the Balkans, you've seen certainly a greater confidence in the stability of the democratic institutions. And what they have achieved in the establishment of the democratic institutions, and in addition, their path toward NATO. So I think as we see countries who have set that path, it's been very, very positive.
And you know this, that U.S. suggests Montenegro can be a member by 2028 if the reforms continue with the same speed. Given the momentum that is created by Russia's war in Ukraine, is that a realistic date in your view? And how critical is EU enlargement for U.S. strategy in the region?
I think as each of these countries look both to NATO and to EU, we see stability in the region. And so I think that both steps are incredibly important.
You mentioned again NATO, and I really want to not to lose this opportunity to ask you, do you think NATO membership is possible for Bosnia, potentially for Kosovo, soon Serbia? These are the three countries that are not member yet.
Well, I mean, Serbia obviously has its own
Position.
position on that. I think as you look to each of the other nations, the importance of setting both the EU and NATO as a goal is that the to-do list, if you will, those items in which they need to accomplish, are the same reform packages, the same governmental reforms, the same security reforms, democratic reforms that each of those nations, for both economic stability, security stability, need to do. And I think it's good for the region. It certainly is good for their security, sovereignty, and economic development. And it would be, I think, good overall for the Balkans. So I think it's very positive.
On Albania, since we're going through all the countries and we're left only talk about Tirana and Skopje in a bit, Albania has opened also in with impressive speed all the EU negotiating clusters, and is now one of the two front runners to become a member. But yet it's burdened by increased concerns on organized crime and high level of corruption. From a U.S. security perspective, Congressman, and also, Tirana will host the NATO summit in 2027. How is the cooperation between the U.S. and Albania on the security level?
Very good. They're a great NATO partner.
Somehow I'm always skeptical of short answers.
That was your question. It had a very easy answer.
On security, it's perfect. How about on the other concerns, on corruption, that somehow lead to security architecture of a country?
I think they're a great partner. I think, and I think is all nations that are in the Balkan region, they certainly have issues and to address, but I think that they're addressing them. I think they're a great partner.
And how much leverage does Washington truly have to protect the judicial reform independence in the country?
Well, again, back to all of the issues in the Balkans, the international community is that partner for building democratic institutions for, as nations look to both the EU and as NATO as a partner, that I think that helps the whole region. And that certainly is the same for Albania.
North Macedonia, a NATO member, has waited since 2005 to advance its EU accession path, but it's stuck again due to the Bulgarian veto after going through change of constitution, change of its name. Is there any meaningful role for the U.S. to help Skopje or even Sofia to overcome this obstacle?
Well, I mean, as you know, we're not a member of the EU. But our advocacy has played a role in the past. I think we continue to be, influential in being an advocate, but we are not a member, as you know.
And last question is, I think, the best, because I want you to talk and to address a concern that relates to all the 6 Western Balkan countries, to the youth living in despair that this transition towards solid democracy and towards EU integration is lasting too long. Is there any specific message that you want to address to them?
Right. So the future is the youth. If change comes about by them making a difference, that you can't wait for someone else to make that difference or to make that change. You are that difference. And the fact that so many over the past 30 years have taken the steps to ensure that the Balkans are on the right path for economic reform, for security reform, for governmental reform, means that the future is theirs to ensure, and they should get involved and make certain that that's solidified, and that in doing so, they'll ensure their future.
Congressman Turner, thank you so much for talking to Balkans Debrief and for being such a great supporter of the region.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
Truly appreciate it.
Thank you.